Welcome in to Greenville Grit. This is Greenville Residents in Touch with your hosts, Terry Williams and Michael Overton. This is the show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Greenville Toyota, the Overton Group, and Bill Clark Homes. Now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Good evening and welcome to the Greenville Grit. I am Terry Williams.
And I am Michael Overton. Terry, we've got a wonderful guest with us tonight, Barbara Lipscomb.
Guest.
Yep, absolutely, the city manager for the city of Greenville. Thank you, Barbara, for coming on the show.
And thank you for having me.
And we're going to do a little bit different setup tonight, Terry. We're not doing commercial breaks. We've got so much to talk about with with the taxes and the budget and some other items I'm sure Barbara would like to throw in. I'm sure she's dreading probably some of these conversations we're going to have. But before we do get into the show, we do need to thank our sponsors. So we got to thank Greenville Toyota, and Craig Goas and the Greenville Toyota team has been with us since the beginning. If you're looking for a new Toyota or Scion vehicle or a new used car, be sure to go see them on Greenville Boulevard, or you can call them at 321-3000 or greenvilletoyota.com.
That's right.
You also have the Overton Group.
Thank you, Michael.
Real estate property management professionals in commercial real estate, business brokerage, residential real estate, and property management with an office in Greenville and New Bern. And we have a new sponsor.
Brand new.
Now, my dad, one of the things he did when he ran the supermarkets, he ran the meat department.
That's right.
So I was very fortunate as a kid to always get the best cuts of meat at home, and whether steak or chicken or pork chops. Well, Ribeyes is our new sponsor.
That's
and if
right.
you haven't been there, you've got to go to Ribeyes on Fire Tower Road. Joey Woods, the local proprietor, he owns this one and the one in Williamston. So be sure to support our sponsors for this show and let them know that you appreciate them coming on board.
Yep,
so we're going to go straight into this. We've got a lot to talk
about. We want the public to know what's going on with our city council and in your office and discussion about the budget.
Well, I guess, Barbara, give us a really brief background on you, how you got to Greenville. You've been here since August of 2012, almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Hopefully you've enjoyed most of it.
I have.
And just tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Basically, I've been in city management, our city planning, the profession in public administration. Most of my life, I did do about 5 years with the Fortune 500 in marketing and sales. But I've been a planner and an assistant city manager, an interim city manager, deputy city manager, and a city manager in Castleberry, Florida, and Gainesville, Florida, as well as here now.
All right. Well, look, we're very fortunate to have you. That's one of the things I think when Terry and I were talking earlier.
Absolutely.
You have such an amazing background in economic development and a focus that when you came in, and that's one of the focuses that at the time when you were hired, the council there was really focused on that. So you've got experience and you understand the importance of bringing jobs to our community. Mm-hmm. We're very fortunate to have your experience. So thank you for being here in Greenville.
And appreciate it.
And please continue to I guess, kick butt. I don't know what else to say.
Well, it's all about jobs and property, building the property tax base in order to provide, good services to people and get the cost of services down. We really need to have higher tax values.
Well, thank you for saying it. You said building the tax base.
Mm-hmm.
That is a difference between building the tax rate. And that was one of the things we wanted to talk about. Barbara, you're probably going to spend a lot of time nodding but in this conversation.
That's
but
right.
we've had a few things. There's an email that I received from someone that wants to stay anonymous. And I just want to read it really quickly. And it says, I want to express my concern about something that's significant that was added onto the agenda. This is something that a city council person wrote. The night of a meeting, voting on something without giving the public the opportunity to know what is going to be voted on and to talk to us without giving public notice. That is why I'm voting against it. Now, these words were not spoken in the last couple of weeks. These words were spoken back in 2012 when Dennis Mitchell asked to have economic development considered, not voted on, at a city council meeting. So these were actually words from Calvin Mercer talking about that. And somehow, in the last 3 weeks, without any discussion or public input, without any notice of it being put on the agenda, it was put on the agenda, not just a 1 cent tax increase, but even this past Monday night, to be voted on this Thursday, an additional 1 cent tax increase. Terry, give us some thoughts on that.
Oh my! Well, I think that the biggest issue is just not enough notice. Now let's talk about Monday night though, because no one showed up at the public hearing.
Oh yeah, and I'm just as guilty.
Yeah,
I didn't show up.
I was there. I missed the public hearing part, but I was there later. But yes.
And so Greenville, if you're upset about it, you got to be upset with yourself. You didn't show up, and that includes me. as being part of this. This is our voice. This is our opportunity to express our concerns and frustrations, and we have a chance to have a public comment Thursday night, but there is no public hearing. So I think,
Barbara, tell us a little bit, because the public hearing is over based on Monday night. They can make comments on Thursday night about how they feel about it, but you had spoken there's a deadline. This is why we have to go ahead and make the decision probably Thursday night about how the council is going to move forward with approving the budget as it is. Is there even time to make any other changes to the one?
Well, the council can always make changes. That's their individual discussion, and they can make changes. By statute, we have to have everything, the ordinance read, as well as presented and sent into the state, I think 10 days before July 1st.
Okay.
And I want to just clarify a little about the last meeting.
Okay.
It's only been about a week or so since the General Assembly for the state of North Carolina basically rescinded property taxes and told cities that they could not charge any more
on privilege fees.
on privilege fees.
Right.
And so we had to, our staff and I had to struggle to try to get some options together for council and get those presented.
So
Were there any other things? I'm sorry, Terry.
no, I was just going to say you had to scramble there at the end, so you had to go back in and try to find other areas that you thought you
Could be cut.
get those funds and
Right.
cut to make up for the difference.
And just so that people understand, the council back in May had made decisions about the property tax rate as well as the privilege licenses, and had given staff direction in terms of how to build the budget. So we had built the budget, brought it forward, and given it to them. And then at the last minute, the General Assembly had made some changes.
Right. So the first 1% was actually done to take care of facilities maintenance that
That's
we were
correct.
lacking on, that had been discussed about maybe in the bond, which is off the table at this point. We don't want to waste our time on the bond today, but that's how that came about. So then they passed that 1 cent tax to hopefully take care of
That's
those
correct.
issues that seem to be needed, more right away.
Right.
And so then this meeting comes up and is more like a surprise for the public. I don't know with this, with the second 1 cent about, because you're saying they had done away with the privilege licenses, which I was told they sort of used Greenville in the legislature as an example, because we had done away with the caps. Maybe.
Well, I'm not
I know.
really that familiar with that.
That's okay.
But basically, they didn't do away with the privilege licenses for FY15 year. They
Okay.
did that for FY16. So they're totally gone in FY16.
Okay.
But what they said for FY15 is we could not charge any more for next budget year than what we're charging now, and we cannot charge for any companies that are not in our jurisdiction. So in effect, we got a cut.
Okay.
And so we had built the budget around taking the cap off and increasing, and instead we were rolled back to FY14 plus a cut.
Well, was there any other plan besides the tax increase? I mean, that should be this is my opinion, but it should be the absolute last thing you would consider, especially since we're trying to talk about having a bond referendum. And my fear with this, I've been asked to be on the committee to consider a bond,
Right.
and I've said all along, in general, I'm in agreement with it. I was struggling with it when we had discussions of a 1 cent tax increase. I'm really struggling with it with a second tax increase. But was there any other plan presented by staff?
Yes.
As other ways?
I gave the council two options that I discussed. One was the tax increase, the penny, because the penny would raise about the amount of money of the cut. The other one was a number of options in terms of the operating and capital budgets, that they could cut funds, or they could go back into the facilities fund, which we had worked so hard to get up to a sustainable level, and cut that. They can cut transportation funding, or they can go into general fund balance. But, I couldn't quantify what's going to be there in terms of the policy that we have of maintaining a 14% balance in that general fund balance.
Right. And she said something about that fund balance.
Yeah, let's
and,
talk
and
about that
one of
fund
the things we had
balance.
talked about. I've heard rumor, and you need to confirm if I'm wrong on this. Where do we stand? I know we keep around a 14% fund
We-
balance.
we
the state
do.
requires 8%.
Well, it's not a requirement, but it's a highly suggested, I think. I
Okay.
think, well, yeah.
But the 14% is what we as a city have
That's the
adopted
city policy.
historically
Yes.
to say this is what we want to do. Where does that rank in the state? Someone told me that's like the second highest fund balance for comparable cities in the state of North Carolina.
I wouldn't know that. I've never looked
And,
at
and
that.
if that's the case, I mean, that's high. And I agree with having some additional money. But one thing Calvin continues to say on his emails, we keep spending it down, spending it down, spending it down. And reality is we're still almost double, Terry.
So is the
the
city
city
fund
requires.
balance, is the city fund balance underfunded? Would be my question. Is it underfunded? Or where are we stand with the fund balance now? Are we in great shape? Are we?
Yeah, we
You know.
we meet the requirement. We meet the requirement for 14%. But I put it in perspective, and that is, if we had a disaster tomorrow, and we had to run the city for a month and a half, I've got fund balance. That's what that covers, about a month and a half, maybe 2 months of operating expenses.
You're talking about the difference between the 8 and the 14%, that amount?
The
or the whole
8% is about a month,
month.
right?
So we have
Okay.
about
Yeah.
a month and 3/4
Right.
of reserves.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's what that is.
But,
I mean,
but
our
that's
budget
pretty
is.
standard for most cities too. I mean, most cities probably don't have anywhere near that much. I don't know what our neighbors do. I just, and I think it's prudent to have additional money. I've never complained about that. I think at one point there was discussion we were close to 18 to 20%. I know we're not now, but I believe that we were that high at one
So
point.
I looked at the list of the areas that you know, when you said you had the two choices, one was to cut the other areas like transportation or wherever you looked. You looked at the health fund balance.
That was part of the operational expenses.
Okay.
Right.
So was there not any other places, I'm not familiar enough with it, but any other places within the budget
Well-
that maybe didn't have as significant as an effect would be on the police or transportation, like money set aside in the
Town
budget for
commons.
town common? I mean, I know it's
That
not
was
a lot
part of that
money.
recommendation with the long list of operational and capital costs that we could cut. And so
Okay.
town common was in that. And we
But it was
sug-
like 50,000.
It was about 50,000. The reason we did only 50 was because the council had asked staff to basically put something towards starting the town common project. And so we thought it prudent to leave at least some funding for that.
Well, see, that frustrates me, Terry,
Me
because
too.
that's one of
I'm
the
sorry,
reasons
it
we
just
wanted to
does.
talk about the bond referendum and doing the recreation and parks as part of a $10.5 million bond deal, that they wanted to do this. And so if we're putting money aside just to sit aside,
Well,
something, I
not
don't
necessarily
know.
to sit aside, but they would like us
is
to.
it earmarked for anything?
Not yet, but that's because staff hasn't developed anything because
Something to do with
until
it.
we know, exactly what the
Well,
budget is.
I know.
And so it could be minor things.
And that's
it could
me
be
being
it could
critical,
be new
so-
benches, it could be new trash receptacles, it could be a playground, it could be, but small things. This will not build a $10 million project.
No, and to me, it wouldn't hardly even touch the beginning of what we need to do at the town common. It almost is, I hate to say a waste, but it seems like to me it's more important that we have other areas funded that we need, like transportation and police, than we do. I want to have park benches too at the town common, but right now, under the circumstances of what we're facing, it just seems like
Well, it
that
just seems
it would
that if the
be
privilege
more
license, which
important.
caught us with our pants
So how
down.
much money were we
So-
talking about with the privilege license that
It's
we're going to
about
lose?
582,000. Let's just say 600,000.
So it's
Okay.
about equivalent of a 1 cent
It's
tax
it's the
increase.
equivalent
Right.
of a
Okay.
1
So
cent
I think
tax.
going into what you just said, though, is if we're looking at, we understand that we want to have something there, but out of the blue, the state does this to us. Now, I know we all need to probably lobby to tell the state, you need to get your budget done first before you tell us to get our
Tell us
budget
what
done.
to
Because
do.
when you do
Well,
this, a
maybe
week
this
before it's due-
discussion should be to let cities have more home rule and local decisions related to their
that might be
finances as
something
opposed
it's
to.
worth getting
Exactly.
into on that. But
the oth-
just to put that money out there in hopes of starting something, especially when you get surprised by it, but to leave
Right.
it there, now everyone's faced with another tax increase. Again, this goes back to the bond. We would like to see a bond, but we are damaging the ability for this thing to be successfully passed, especially with Pitt Community last year, and not even considering, and I don't know if you've heard what the county's looking to do with tax increases that they've discussed.
Yeah, we don't really know right now what they're going to do. So I think right now the bond is really out of the question. They're having the advisory committee. They'll, start their meetings and decide. That will definitely be the next year, if it even comes about.
Well, I think that's the decision for the council to make
Yeah,
as
I
to
mean,
how
doesn't seem
what
to be
their approach
time.
what their approach was going to be.
Okay. So in the list, one of the areas was a hiring freeze on positions. If they had not gone for the tax increase, then they possibly, that was in your list of cutting the town common, it was freezing a position. But it was a position that's not filled.
Right.
Okay.
Let me put that in perspective. I think since I've been here, I've been managing the positions
Okay.
very closely.
Right.
I basically have to approve them all. And, some positions you need right away. Some we've looked at as part of reorganization, et cetera. So we're freeing up some. We're changing how we work. We're changing the kinds of skills sets we need. And so we did have a couple of positions that when I went back and asked departments whether or not, you could sacrifice this for a while, they were okay with that.
Right. Okay. All right.
Well, we get into tax rates, though. And I
That's
know,
right.
Barbara, we talked in the lobby. We're really talking, what is it? It was $2 for a month for every $150,000 house. Is that what we're looking at for a 1 cent tax increase?
No, for the two, it would be about $2.
For it was a $100,000 house or $150,000?
It was a $150,000
$150,000.
house. Yes.
So, and I know, I mean, that's really not a lot of money. We're not talking, if you got a $300,000 house, you're talking $4 a month, $50 a year, essentially. So I think what I'm more concerned about, let's go back into economic development. And one of the things, I know the state threw the curveball at us, but we spent the first 4 months of this council talking about the 4 unrelated rule, and we're not going there. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, we're not
But
talking about it
but
anymore.
we spent so much time on that. We
Right.
completely lost our focus on building the tax base through
Right.
economic development. Part of my concern is, even though that $150,000 is only $2 a month, my concern is where we stand in the state. I ran an analysis pulled through the Department of Revenue, tax rates for the cities, and I pulled the top 10 cities in terms of population in the state, and added 6 more cities on top that are local: New Bern, Washington, and other areas. And right now we rank 6th out of the top of the 16 cities in our tax rate without the tax increase. Once the tax increase goes through, we'll be 4th highest out of those 16 cities. If we do the bond, we'll be 3rd highest. High Point and Greensboro being higher than we would be, and Greensboro will only be 3 cents higher. And I didn't look at their county. That's just the city. My concern is really, what is your feeling with economic development? I mean, is there a concern that this could damage the long-term opportunities that we had to bring business here because our tax rate is higher, or do you have any feelings for that at all?
I don't. I guess I need to put this in perspective too. I think just comparing the rate for cities is not sufficient. You also need to look at how much those rates produce.
Right.
And so we may have a tax rate of X amount and somebody else has the same amount, but their production in terms of revenue may be twice ours. And that's
Right.
the situation that Greenville is in.
Well, where are we at then?
Our 1 cent doesn't produce the same amount that Asheville produces. They produce about twice as much per
Now,
or so.
can you explain that for the audience to help them understand what you mean by that?
It has to do with the value of the properties. If you have a more densely populated community, that you have high rises, et cetera, that properties that are bringing in a lot of value, then your 1 cent will generate a lot more. And we also need to remember that in Greenville, we start off with 25% of the properties off the tax rolls.
Right.
So I have to overcome that in building a
And those
building
types
a
of
budget.
properties are what, municipal buildings,
Vidant,
churches,
ECU.
Vidant.
The
Yeah.
hospital and
ECU.
ECU, who are great partners and great
Right.
for us economically, but we don't get taxation from those.
Right.
And so we have a different kind of economy than maybe some of the other communities or so. So I just think we ought to clarify that first of all. Secondly, I think we're in a great position economic development-wise. I think that we have wonderful cooperation with Vidant and ECU. We've been working with them on new projects. We've been working together, particularly with ECU, on a millennial campus that hopefully we will have more tech transfer. We've been working on economic development in terms of our uptown, and we have 2 new studies going on. And as much as some people malign studies, but I think there's some excitement about what people are seeing with the river study as well as with the Dickinson area. And so if you look at your downtown area, which is your highest producing land in Pitt County, and if you could get more economic development in this area, I think the whole community will benefit. It will throw off a lot more, and hopefully over time you could, reduce your actual taxes because you'll have more monies coming in.
That's right. Well, and I think too, when you're talking about on the second choice, not doing the 1 cent and going through each department and keep cutting things, I don't think cutting our services is going to help economic development. When companies come and they look for what are we offering when they bring employees here in housing and city services, they look at the whole picture, and if they feel like, well, you can't accommodate what we have big plans for you, but you can't accommodate that because you've cut your services.
I totally agree.
Issue.
And one of the things that I think economically a lot of studies have shown is that companies don't necessarily make their decisions about locations based on just taxation.
Right.
There are a lot of high taxation places that are desirable for companies to bring their employees in because they have a great quality of life.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things we need to look at. We need to fix our facilities. We need to prepare our community. We need to get the streets and roads fixed, and I think that we'll have a better presentation to companies.
Where are we at going into roads? I know one of the things Dennis Mitchell has said is that we had earmarked a year ago, $5 million approximately for road repair. Have we started that process at all?
Yes, we have. It was about $4 million, and we've done about $1 million so far. And we're also looking at some new processes. I've used some different types of road repairs in different areas of the country. And so we're going to be piloting some micro-surfacing so that you could basically just, put a layer on top and so that you don't have to, you can preserve that road and you don't have to go into it and totally reconstruct it.
Start all
Once
over.
we start having to go down to the base and take the base out and build it back up, it costs three times or more for that road. And so we're looking at roads in a different manner, and we're looking at a lot of the local roads. And one of the things that when people talk about roads, sometimes they don't understand which roads are the city roads.
That was going to be something I wanted you to
so-
say.
Something like Greenville Boulevard is actually not a city road.
That is not
That's
a city
right.
road. That's a state road. And so if you're frustrated with Greenville Boulevard or Fire Tower Road or some of those roads, Memorial, et cetera, this program does not address that. But I think the road that most people drive on and know that is a Greenville city road is Arlington. And we need to totally rebuild sections of Arlington as well as just repave sections. And so that's going to be very major for us.
That's true. So let's talk just a minute about go back to the river study and the Dickinson Avenue study and tell us how important do you think those studies are for our future?
I think they're going to be, they're good studies, and I think that the study results could be very incredible for our community. And the reason I chose the consultants for these 2 studies is because we talked about them having some ability to engage private sector and bring developers into town, and so they're giving us suggestions of things that we could do to sort of entice the development community to come in. And I just think that from what I've seen so far, the community is going to be very pleased. And if we can start to initiate some of those suggestions and get some private money in, we'll move forward economically.
I think it's obviously important seeing the condition, now that we're not in a good condition, but where we are with our funds in the city, how even more important that we have to engage private funds.
Yes.
We have no choice to get where we want to be, and so it's just got to be done.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
is the theater, we're talking about, I guess, public stuff,
Yeah.
is the theater any part, is the city funding any portion of, I know that you've got 2 offers out on the theater right now, or people have submitted, but was there any money earmarked in the budget for the theater?
There was money earmarked to make repairs to the exterior and I think a fly wall, but we went out for bids for that work, and we don't have sufficient funds to do that. And so I think our best bet for that theater is going to be to look to get it into some private hands and
Right.
for the private sector to try to take the lead on it.
Well, I served on that theater committee, and I was on the redevelopment commission at the time. And so the funds to repair that was actually funded by the redevelopment commission.
Right,
Some
it's in
repair
their
work that
budget.
needed to be done. So when you presented the budget a month or so ago, there was a list of some things, and I thought that it said for the theater $1.5 million or something like that was set aside in the budget. There was not. Was there any
No.
amount of funds that was set aside for
There's
the theater?
about I think a 200,000, 250,000
Okay.
just for repairs, but the total rebuild on that theater is about a $2.5 million
it's a lot
project.
more than
Well, I think
that.
the turnover
Right.
in
Well,
Washington was a $2.5 million project.
And when we
so.
were making the plans and trying to raise the funds and get matching grants, we never intended. It was never intended for the city to pay for that part of it. It was we tried to raise the money and get matching grants. That just didn't fly at the time. I think the economy certainly hurt that too. So I think that was important. To the city doesn't mean they wouldn't have been asked to help operate it in some capacity. Like sometimes they'll give 25 or 50,000 toward operating something like Uptown Greenville or whatever. I'm just using that as an example, but I don't think it was ever intended for it to be in the city budget from our perspective.
Right.
Because
No,
it's just not going to happen.
No, it's not.
And especially, that's kind of the same way I feel about the town common in a way. Although I know that's a different kind of property, and that's a very important piece of our puzzle. I'm just not seeing where the funds, based on what
It's
we're
gonna be a
talking about
significant
today, it's
investment
just
to really- to
to
get
get
it
it
It's a
to-
significant investment,
Yes.
but don't lose sight of the economic development potential around the common
Absolutely.
because
That's it.
that would
That's
help
the key.
grow.
If you're looking at it from an economic development
Right.
That's
standpoint.
right.
Right.
I agree
And
with
that's
that.
the
That's the
problem, so.
piece that would help us with the First Street and that area
Mm-hmm.
of the uptown to get that
And that's
going
probably
and moving.
the only way we're going to be able to manage usefulness of that area, keeping, of course, some of it as park. But I don't see any other way not to have it as a mixed use.
And please don't understand
I'm
that.
not
I'm not
saying
saying
that
that we
we're voting on
develop
that.
on the park.
I understand that, but around it.
but
and-
around it,
Yes,
yes.
Around it.
exactly.
It needs to be a part of the town that is attractive, that brings people to that uptown area for families to enjoy, and we need to utilize it. You get a
Right.
lot of land there and give different
Absolutely.
things. You can have open space to appease the people with open space, but I don't think the whole thing needs to be open space.
Yeah.
Because,
This-
we're not using it.
That's right.
This is that area, the uptown area. That's the highest valued land in all
Absolutely.
of
That's right.
Polk,
That's
Well,
Pitt
and we
County.
got only a couple of minutes left. Where are we at as a city, infrastructure-wise, in comparison to, I guess, cities we would be competing against for those economic development dollars and companies looking at us? Infrastructure, how we look, how are our roads in comparison? How is our water and sewer infrastructure? How is the electric infrastructure in terms of those people coming to Greenville saying you've got it or you don't? Where do we stand?
Well, I serve on the GUC board, and we have, the water, wastewater, the electric and gas, and we're not as competitive in the electric area, but we think that may be solved if the Duke deal goes through. And we are planning for facilities for water and sewer, and so that's in the capital programs, and we're also right now doing interconnects with for gas, as well as we have compressed gas, which really saved us a lot of money this year when we had the storm, and we could use some of that gas as opposed to the pipeline gas. So I think we, as a city and a community, we have good utilities, and I think that companies are interested in coming to a community like this. We do need to improve our overall infrastructure, our streets, our roads. We have a huge stormwater issue that we're going to have to address in the uptown area with the Town Creek culvert, and we're getting some no-interest loans, et cetera, for that. And we also have commissioned studies to look at all of our stormwater drainage basins because we have flooding in the community, and we'll be addressing
That's
those
right.
issues as we move forward. So yes, we are like other cities. None of them are perfect unless you're some of the perfect ones, new ones in Florida. But as far as most cities, you have your challenges, and you have to rise to meet the challenges.
Well, I know we've got to wrap the show up. We do need to one time, because we did not do the commercials. We got to thank again the Overton
Absolutely.
Group, Greenville Toyota, Ribeye Steakhouse for coming on board with us. Got to thank Barbara for coming on and during
Really
a little
appreciate
bit
it.
of our frustration. Thank you for putting up with that, but also for being here and for being part of this city. Terry, do you have
Thank
anything to
you.
wrap up
Yeah,
with?
I appreciate it very much. I just think it's real important for the public to hear from someone like you and get it straight from you.
Well, make
And I
sure you
think
tune
that's
in
great.
again Friday night, 6:30, Saturday morning, 9:30, and thank you for joining us on the Greenville Grit.